Very good. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the regular Board of Ed meeting. We originally were going to have an executive session prior, but we didn't have a quorum, so we are just going to start the meeting off as we typically do. Just a quick housekeeping item. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the School District of the Chatham Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough, Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, and the Star Ledger. Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind doing roll call?
Mr. Gilfield.
Hello.
Mr. Hart.
Yep.
Ms. Chambers. Here. Ms. Chicarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Here.
Ms. Hayes.
Here.
Mr. Ryan.
Here.
Mr. Valenti.
Here.
And Ms. Weber.
Here.
9 present in the county.
And thank you. If you're able, could you please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so just jumping ahead to the board president's comments, again, just a reminder, we did not have an executive session prior to this. So very quickly, first, at the top of the order, I would like to congratulate Dr. LaSousa on his Superintendent of the Year in Morris County. Well done. That's really quite an accolade given the stack of districts in Morris County, so well done and congratulations to you. Now get back to work. Enough cheering about you. So again, just congratulations, Mike, that's fantastic. The other thing I wanted to mention, I just wanted to queue up for the board members for board business later. When last we met, we were going to talk about two things publicly. One, Mr. Valenti had said that, we need to start focusing more on safety, how the board feels, how the board, wants to proceed. We've had a couple of meetings with some of our local officials, and now we have to decide as a board, how do we want to proceed, specifically as it relates to Class 3 officers and any other, improvements or hardening of our security at all of our schools. So I'm going to cue that up now. I'll probably start with the newest members, Mr. Ryan, Ms. Chambers on the end, and work our way through into the center here on, your thoughts, how we should proceed. Certainly if we don't have a majority of the board that wants to proceed, then, we'll either have to continue to talk about it or, see how that's going to unfold. The second item that I wanted to queue up for board business is the opportunity that came to the board that we just want to talk about regarding property next to one of the school buildings. So just keep that in mind as well. And extremely unusual for me, I have a third thing regarding the lawsuit that Chatham has been facing over the last maybe 6 or 8 months. I just wanted to read a prepared statement. And Dr. LaSousa or Peter, Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind after the meeting, could you email it out to the press that generally covers the meetings? Ed, Kathy, and I forget the gentleman's name from NJ.com. Mike, you have his email, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about?
I can find it.
Very good, thank you. I would prefer the press release come from either you or Peter. So just to officially put it in the record, the School District of the Chathams recently received the United States District Court Judge Kevin McNulty's decision on motions to dismiss that had been filed by their counsel in the lawsuit filed by Libby Hilsenrath on behalf of her child, initial CH, alleging that the district violated her child's First Amendment rights because it taught about Islamic faith during the Middle Eastern Nations unit of the World Cultures and Geography class. While the district was not successful in dismissing what it considers to be an entirely frivolous lawsuit, the district remains confident that the facts which will be developed during the course of discovery will clearly demonstrate that the instruction provided to the plaintiff's child did not violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. During the course of litigating this matter, the district will demonstrate that the particular class covered a wide variety of topics, including the study of other religions, namely Hinduism, Buddhism, during the Eastern countries portion of the class. This, as Judge McNulty correctly noted in his opinion, would entirely eviscerate the plaintiff's claim that the district was promoting or endorsing the Islamic faith. In other words, there is nothing in Judge McNulty's opinion that would suggest the district acted inappropriately or that it violated any student's constitutional rights in this case. Unfortunately, the district and its staff will be required to spend countless hours defending this baseless lawsuit. In addition, by filing the motion to dismiss, the district was able to achieve a significant victory with the withdrawal of the plaintiff's claim for compensatory damages. Compensatory damages are typically granted to persons who claim some type of injury as a result of the alleged constitutional violation. This voluntary action by plaintiff clearly establishes that no harm came to either her or her son as a result of the district's curriculum. The district is likewise pleased that Judge McNulty's decision suggests to the plaintiffs to consider voluntarily dismissing some of the named defendants, including but not limited to the social studies teachers that were named in the lawsuit. So that is our official response to the litigation that's currently ongoing. Peter, you'll enter that into the record and send that out accordingly?
Yes.
Very good. So I apologize for the long preamble. So again, if the board members would just, think about the two items that we've queued up for board business later. Without further ado, Dr. LaSousa, if we can jump right over to the superintendent's report.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Weber. We had a great end to the school year. Things went very well at all of our school buildings. Thank you to those of you who came to graduation. High school graduation was a great success also. At the current time, we're in the process of staffing, ramping up our staffing efforts for next year. We still have a few positions that we are interviewing for, and our hope and expectation is that we will have every appointment that we need come September on the agenda for next year, on next meeting's agenda, except for those positions that might arise because of enrollment changes that typically take place at this time of the year. So we're keeping an eye on enrollment while we're staffing the positions that we know are vacant right now. And I wanted to take the opportunity, I've been waiting, but we've had other presentations at recent meetings. I gave a presentation to all of our 8th graders this year as they were selecting their courses, and I did this as a result of feedback that I've been getting at PTO meetings and even from some of you over the past year or so when I've been speaking to parents primarily about colleges, college selection, student stress, anxiety, and one of the recommendations to me was to actually take it straight to the client and go right to the students themselves as opposed to the parents, because the students are the ones who are kind of trying to interpret the process that they're going through as they enter high school and work their way up toward the end of high school. So I did do that, and since I did that, I also shared this presentation with a few of our PTOs. They've enjoyed it, so I figured I would give kind of like a real quick walkthrough tonight, and I promise I won't take very long. And again, the overall context and reason, purpose for doing this has been to try to get a handle on some of the anxieties and stresses that our students report feeling, and they're well known to all of you from previous conversations that we've had. So I began my presentation to our 8th graders, the 350 of them or so, by giving them a quick true or false quiz. And of course, many of them were very nervous. They were, in Genesis with their parents, trying to figure out what courses to take. They were saying things to their counselors like, if I don't take any honors class, I won't get into college. So naturally, this first slide, the answer to that question is true. The answer to this question is false. The answer to this question is really, really false, as I told them, and as I'll demonstrate to you in a second. And then I took them to this slide, which I know many of you have seen before because I use it all the time. But the New York Times published an infographic a couple of years ago about student performance in all of the school districts across the United States. Every purple dot here represents a school district in the United States with a 6th grade. And what the authors of this study out of Stanford University did is they mapped what the average test score was in the school, whether it was right on grade level or above grade level or way below grade level by 6th grade. And that was the y-axis, and the x-axis was the wealth of the community, the socioeconomic status in the community, with communities with high levels of poverty on the left side of the axis and wealthier, more affluent communities on the right side. So to give you an example of a community in New Jersey, Camden, which has been in the news and actually has made gains since this infographic appeared in the Times. Camden is, of course, one of the poorest cities in our state, and on average, the average test score in Camden City is about 2.5 years behind grade level by the time kids hit 6th grade. So if you think about it, they're performing at a 3rd, 4th grade level by the time they get to 6th grade. To take a community more right in the middle of the road in terms of socioeconomics, Carteret was one that I found to represent New Jersey. And if you wanted to look at a really high-end community, like, say, Beverly Hills, you can see that Beverly Hills is, on the right side of the graph in terms of its socioeconomics and its affluence, and it's also well above grade level. Well, Chatham's all the way up here, right? So for all of us, we probably are not surprised by this because we have either grown up in or visited or lived in other communities and know that Chatham isn't really typical for the communities in the United States. But for our kids and the students that we educate, they think this is the norm, some of them. They think that everyone is like Chatham and that Chatham is just average. And it's hard for kids to kind of understand that they're all the way here on the edge of the world, and keeping up with the Joneses in their class doesn't mean that they're just middling through and keeping up with the average kid in the country. So being up here at the edge of the world looks like this. It looks like all of our kids just about go to 4-year colleges, and those that don't, most of them go to 2-year schools. And that can place a lot of pressure on students, especially as they hit high school and they're being told and it's being reinforced by their peers that you've got to have a rigorous course load, you have to take the toughest courses possible, you have to do everything you can to get into college, you have to beef up your application, you have to start a new club, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of just played around with our 8th graders and asked them if they could guess where these folks began college when they left high school. So our president, he started at Fordham, something that 2 gentlemen in the front row have in common, actually. And I'll talk about them in another 10 minutes. Hillary Clinton, and again, this was a few months ago, so I just used the two nominees for the last election. And of course, most of our 8th graders, they recognized all of these folks, but they didn't have any idea where they went to college initially. They all watched Shark Tank, or many of them do, so they knew Mark Cuban went to Indiana University. Who's better than Ellen?
Nobody.
2 Rutgers grads, Natalie Morales and Carly Lloyd. These folks, I didn't know who they were. I Googled teen heartthrobs, literally on the internet, some of you know. But the 8th graders knew who they were right away. I had no idea who they were. And then I said, if you don't want to be a teen heartthrob, you want to do something more exciting, be a school superintendent, I went to Gettysburg College. So then what I did is I just looked at our students at Chatham between the years 2015 and 2017, our last 3 graduating classes. Again, this was before last week. And I just looked at how many kids applied to and were accepted at those schools from that previous slide. And you can see we have quite a fair number of students that went to many of those schools, not all of them. So I crossed off the ones that we didn't have any kids apply to or gain acceptance to. And then I took off the list Reed and Wellesley because we only had a couple of kids that applied there, or were accepted there, I should say. And then I took all these other schools where we had lots and lots, dozens upon dozens of students gain entry. And I asked the 8th graders, well, what do you think what courses do you think they were taking in ninth grade? You guys are all selecting your courses right now. What kind of classes do you think the kids who got into Fordham and Gettysburg and Syracuse, what kind of classes do you think they were taking? Many of the eighth graders thought that the kids were taking honors classes, because when you enter ninth grade in Chatham High School, there are 3 levels of classes, essentially. There's an honors level, a regular level, and a concepts level. Concepts being a level for students usually with some learning needs or some challenges. The regular level right in the middle, and of course the honors for the kids who are high flyers. And they can take each one of these levels in the 4 academic areas listed here: ELA, math, social studies, and science. Looking at these kids, and I went right in order of how many students were accepted at each of those colleges. At NYU, when those 36 kids were in ninth grade, if they were in ninth grade at Chatham High School, 11 took 4 honors classes, 9 took 3, 6 took 2, 3 took 1, and 2 did not take an honors class. So in other words, not every kid who got into NYU, of the 36 of ours that got into NYU, loaded up on nothing but honors classes.
Famous.
Mark Cuban's Indiana University, you can see that actually half of the kids didn't take a single honors class when they were in ninth grade. This was very surprising to our eighth graders. Syracuse, don't know what Carmelo Anthony was taking in high school, but again, we didn't have a single kid who was accepted to Syracuse University who had loaded up on 4 honors classes, and in fact, almost half of the students didn't take any honors classes in ninth grade. I like this photo. So when Hurricane Irene hit a bunch of years ago, I have a fake tooth in the front of my mouth, and the cap had fallen out, and my dentist's office was underwater for like from August 25th to September 18th or something. So I had no tooth for when school opened. And my wife has used this as her Facebook profile photo every now and again. So I keep it alive, and opened up the school year one time with staff with this photo. So Gettysburg College, granted it's not Yale or Harvard, but again, the majority of students who were accepted at Gettysburg didn't take a single honors class in ninth grade. Fordham, which is a very tough school to get into, and Donald Trump didn't finish at Fordham. He transferred to University of Pennsylvania, but when he started, you can see that the distribution there is kids of all kinds of stripes, all kinds of profiles, ended up gaining acceptance to Fordham. Delaware, which is one of our most popular schools in terms of destination, a great place. You can see, again, majority of kids, not one single honors class when they were in ninth grade. And then Rutgers, which is our most popular university in terms of acceptance, not necessarily where they actually attend. Even distribution in terms of honors classes, number of honors classes taken. So then I mentioned to the students something that we saw here in the fall, I think it was when Doug Walker presented his report. But that's just simply that there are a lot of schools we're familiar with where we know our students attend in high numbers, like Gettysburg and Lehigh and Penn State, et cetera. But a lot of our kids go to County College of Morris, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I listed a few folks who've gained some success in life, a modicum of success in life, who have attended County Community College, and also looked up our students who ended up going to CCM between 2015 and 2017. And you can see that 38, so that's similar number to some of those other schools that I just put on the screen. And they go to CCM for all kinds of reasons, right? Their GPAs range from 2.0 to above 4.0. Many of them have taken an AP class. These are students who may be attending because it's a good value, because the field that they want to go into has some kind of special program at CCM that they're attracted to, or it's financial. Whatever the case is, nothing wrong with going to two-year school. So then I did one last thing, and I'm going to wrap up here in a minute. Then I looked not just when they entered ninth grade, but then what happened to them when they were in Chatham High School for the 4 years. So looked at the courses they were taking in ninth grade in terms of honors, regular concepts, and then how many of them ended up taking at least one AP class or more than one AP class by the time they graduated? Because our honors level in these 4 subjects turn into AP classes by the time you get up into junior, senior year. So I gave them this little profile, and these are actual students from either the class of 2017, 2016, 2015. What they were doing, and then what they looked like just by the AP metric by the time they graduated. So you can see student A, high-end kid, 4 honors classes loaded up, 6 AP classes by graduation. Student B, 0 honors classes in 9th grade, but by the time he or she graduated, had gone on to take 7 AP classes. Wasn't ready for honors in 9th grade, but by the time she or he graduated, had taken AP classes. And student C, no honors classes at all in 9th grade, a concepts class, and an AP class by graduation. They all got into good schools. You didn't need to take the 4 honors and 6 AP classes to get into a decent college. Did the same thing here, and this time I took, one of those high-powered students, one of the students who was kind of in the middle of the pack, and here a student who would have been toward the other end in terms of classes in 9th grade. No honors classes, no regular classes, 4 concepts classes. The 8th graders were surprised by this. One more time, same type of scenario. This kid had no AP classes, and I also confirmed with our high school administration that none of the students I was using had been selected to participate in athletics at the college level. So these are not student athletes in any of the slides. And one more. Again, super high-powered kid, middle of the packer, other end. And of course, I'm being a little bit clever in that student A might have applied to 10 classes in Loyola colleges, and Loyola might have been sort of a safety, whereas for someone else it might have been a reach. But it's still interesting to note that you don't have to feel inadequate if you're a kid going into 9th grade and you're not an honors level kid. So the final message to our students was, do what's best for you. It will work out. You don't have to become overwhelmed by this. And that's it. So.
Do you think you made some headway, Mike? I know, this is at least the 5th time I've seen this set of slides, because I went to the 8th grade, I
Yep.
went to the PTOs. Are you thinking you're making some headway? The students I saw oohed and awed and oh my gosh, some of the pressure is put on by parents, some of it's put on by peers. Do you think the tide will start to shift, as the kids start to realize, I'm on the edge of the world, I'm on that top right quadrant. So do you think we'll see some shift in a year, 5 years? What's our measure of success here? And I agree, the kids really do think this is the norm, which is why I mentioned it during the graduation speech. They're all going off thinking, oh my goodness, I might be struggling, and 2 months in, they realize they're at the top of the heap. At any university that they went. A recent Princeton grad, she said when she went away to school, she just graduated 2 weekends ago, she was so nervous that she was just going to be overwhelmed, and about a month in, she's like, oh my God, I totally got this. She goes, I really started working hard probably midway through my junior year. But she thought it was the norm. So how do we get the kids to maybe relax a little bit and maybe not put so much pressure on themselves?
We have more work to do. We have to keep talking. I know that there were students this year who opted not to take honors classes that they were recommended for.
Okay.
I don't know if it was more, because I don't know what the baseline was in previous years. And I do want to do this to the class of 9th graders that is moving into 10th grade. I couldn't do it in the spring because we didn't have an auditorium at the high school, and it just wouldn't have been the right venue to do it in a gymnasium. We just have to keep working at it, I think.
Hey, Mike, I know you do stuff with the college grads or kids that are in college speaking to the high school students. Have we ever done that with the middle school students, speaking to the college kids, speaking to the 8th graders to tell them how their experience was through Chatham High School, where they ended up going, and kind of how well prepared they were?
We have not. That's a good idea. Yeah. Right. We only do it for seniors, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should do it for the
earlier
younger kids. I think it's important, especially before they're even looking at stuff, to know that, this isn't necessarily out of my reach, and or this isn't necessarily a bad, too below my reach, you know what I mean? I think it's, you know, all of these kids are looking up to the alumni in this town and seeing what amazing things they're doing. I think it's probably good to see if we can get some sort of a cross-section of, you know, all different things that people have done so kids know, you know,
It's a good idea.
yeah.
They're always thrilled to address the students.
Mike, I will say I do have an 8th grader who was in on your presentation, and he doesn't share a whole lot about school. He did come home and tell me that you were at school today, and I was like, okay. And then he shared that you gave the presentation. And I think for him having older siblings, he's a little more savvy as to kind of what goes on at the high school and after the high school. But a lot of his friends are the oldest in their family, and he said it did spark some conversation among them. So I think it didn't fall on deaf ears.
Thank you. Good to hear.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. LaSusa? Comments? No, we're good. Dr. LaSusa, did you have anything else for your report? Personnel items, or you're going to wait on that?
I was going to wait till you vote on the personnel items, and I don't have anything else, but I know Mr. DeQuilla has the construction report.
Okay, very good. We'll jump it over for our business administrator's report.
Just very quickly, a quick update on construction. At the Milton School, the contractor is very close to completion. They have finishing up some interior work and have begun the exterior work and getting the building ready and done. There are a few items that are being worked on that they had to wait till school was out to finalize. The alterations of the roof have been finished.
Oh, they have been finished, okay.
The middle school contractor is making steady progress. The exterior block work is done, the interior is almost complete. The roof is done, and they will begin the brickwork next. Unfortunately, approximately a week and a half ago, we made the press for the contractor hitting a 4-inch gas line. While digging for the storm drains, they also uncovered an abandoned oil tank, which we presume, we've done some digging, and prior to the middle school was built in 1957, so prior to the 50s, the land was occupied by a greenhouse, of which the original farmhouse was the Chatham family practice building, and we believe that the oil tank was the fuel source to heat the greenhouse. And actually, we're making progress working with the guidance of our environmental consultant we've nailed down a firm that will remove the tank for a lot less money than we anticipated.
Okay.
So hopefully, and dispose of whatever is in the tank. So hopefully when they pull it out, the bottom doesn't fall out and create a bigger issue, but we're forging ahead and taking care of that. And none of that work is holding up the progress on the school at the present time.
Because that was all water retention work.
Yeah, it's all water retention work, and the oil tank will not be excavated until the week of July 8th, because we don't want to create a bigger hole for the whole fireworks issue.
Oh,
So,
right.
you know, we don't want to cut out a hole in the driveway.
Okay.
Because the oil tank is under the driveway.
And the cost to remove it, the's no insurance for that? That comes right out of capital reserve?
There is, but we do have a deductible, so we'll wait and see. Right now, the initial estimate is about $5,000 to pull the tank out, and we obviously just have to rebuild the ground and repaint it. So it's all in conjunction with Beasley Insurance, who carries the district's environmental liability insurance.
Okay.
The high school auditorium, the contract again, making steady progress. Carpeting, the painting is done. The carpeting and vinyl floor is almost done, installed. The seats will be installed next, and the contractor started breaking up the concrete by the outside entrance of the auditorium today.
And the orchestra pit, the mechanics that go into
The
that?
orchestra pit, the carpet is all laid. They're working on the rigging and everything else.
Okay.
So
I was
they
there
have multiple people doing
yesterday.
different things at the same time.
I think I was there yesterday. They hadn't started the rigging, but it looks fantastic.
But you would ask the question, all the
Yeah, all the
wires that are hanging down are
The kit
for in
lighting.
advance of the rigging. So,
rigging on the stage, but not rigging for the pit.
no.
Okay.
And the central office, the contractor has completed the outside block work. They've done interior of the metal framing of the interior walls. Once the roof is installed, they can continue working inside, since then it will be waterproof. When the roof gets done, then they can start the brickwork. The contractor is behind schedule, but we're constantly on them for a revised updated completion date, which has been hard to get for some reason.
And I was under the impression that the architect has sort of assigned somebody from the
Oh,
office.
yes, we have I guess you could call him clerk of the works, who's there a couple hours every day, He was at the last construction meeting, which is 2 weeks ago Thursday. He was on them about submittals, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and definitely have seen much more improvement in the contractor since the architect rep is on site every day.
Okay, fantastic. I appreciate that.
That's all I have unless there's any other questions.
Just a quick question on the lighting and some of the ancillary equipment. Does that come in dead last, like not until the fall? Like all the new lighting? Like all the wiring is up, but there's no physical,
In which,
in the auditorium?
a lot of the lighting...
I don't mean the accent lighting, I mean the stage lighting.
Oh, the stage lighting, I believe, goes after the rigging.
After the rigging,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, no, the accent lighting looks fantastic. I meant the stage lighting. Is that already ordered and sitting in a warehouse, or is that...
Everything should be all ordered and ready to go.
Okay, so we won't have to wait for any kind of opening night for that, it's all
No.
ordered, okay. Does anybody have any questions? And again, you said you don't anticipate the oil tank delaying the project.
No.
And is there any, are we looking at any fines or exposure for the gas pipe break?
If there is any fines and exposure on the gas pipe, that is on the contractor, since the contractor was digging the storm drain and hit it.
Okay, so no exposure to the district?
No.
Financially or otherwise, okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry, does anybody else have any questions for Peter? You're good? Good. Okay, very good. Moving on to committee reports. Ms. Kenny for personnel.
Personnel has not met since our last meeting.
Very good. Jumping over to Ann, Ms. Ciccarelli for curriculum.
We have not met either since our last meeting.
Okay, thank God Matt's busy. Matt for finance and facilities.
We actually just met prior to this meeting, discussed a number of different things. One was the potential revenue sources that are available to us. We reevaluated or talked about the activity fees and the structure that we currently use, parking fees, potential advertising, auditorium rental. Just basically from a perspective of one thing that we are long is good facilities and actually better facilities coming online now with the new auditoriums, and just figuring out different ways for us to drive additional revenue to the district. You'll be approving within the finance section, which is the transfer to capital reserve at the end of the year. There's one thing that we did want to bring public. There is a property that is adjacent to the high school. The owners had approached the school district as to whether or not we would like to purchase this property in case we needed it for future use. At this time, it is the opinion of the board that we do not need to own this property, but we want to make sure that it was publicly known that it was available to us. We did our annual review of the athletic costs, and then last but not least, the oil tank situation, which Pete already spoke to. And we meet again in a month.
Matt, two quick questions. Do you have an ETA when on the additional revenue source? When is that going to be worked on through the summer or September?
It's going to be, it has to be more of an all-encompassing.
I'm specifically asking about activity fees.
Well, the activity fees is the problem, is there's a number of different ways the administration is looking at this from a perspective of how it's going to be structured, whether or not it's a flat fee that goes across, is it a per-term fee, is it a fee that's based against actual district costs? So in essence, right now, whereas the desire to potentially increase that as a revenue source, the formulas that are needed to implement it correctly and fairly are not in place. So it is a ASAP situation, it is not a imminent situation.
September?
Ish.
Hope.
We'll start a school year.
That's the goal, but I think, it was, from a perspective of just the four different people that were in the room, there was a lot of different conversations as to, in essence, what was fair, and is it a situation where, the biggest users pay the biggest costs? Is that the right thing to do? So there's a lot to get to. The administration's been tasked with a number of different things that we asked them to do from a perspective of coming up with this formula. And are we going to meet in September? I think the hope is yes, but I can't guarantee it.
If we want to make changes to the activity fee, they have to be done really latest the board meeting in August.
Okay.
At latest, because they will impact any of the participants of the fall
Right.
activities before the school year even begins, right? So we have all the athletic activities that begin. We've got marching band. We've got all kinds of stuff.
Right.
If we don't get it done by then we'd have to probably wait for implementation for the next school year.
Right, I'd hate to wait a whole year. Is there any way, Matt, for the committee to do, for this year only, quick and dirty, double the fees for athletics, keep them the same for the clubs, and then work the formula out for the whole year? I mean, we've heard from a number of,
I think
Folks
at a
that-
minimum is it's going to have to come to one more additional meeting from the finance committee perspective.
Well, yeah, we got direction from the finance committee,
Okay.
marching orders for
So-
by the next meeting
More in
to have,
July?
yep,
So-
correct.
Okay.
And then at that point, you probably will be able to make a determination if we want to step on the gas and schedule a couple of more meetings and try to,
Okay.
hammer them out, or if the opinions are too diverse to be able to do that.
One thing I want to ask, whether we keep the fees the same or we increase them, I do think we can do a better job in allowing families that need support financially to have a place to come that's secure and it's kind of tightened up. I think it's a struggle for some families who have multiple kids and are working hard to stay in Chatham. And I think we can do a better job. As we always say, we'll take care of you, just come to us. Well, maybe they don't want to come to us. Maybe they don't want to tell us that they're having a hard time and that they can't afford $300. But this could be a reality for people. So I think I know some districts have an email set up that's secure, that families can send an email in and explain their situation, and it can be reviewed by one person or a committee or whatever, and not that we would ever deny anyone, but it's very hard to go to your coach or to your band director and say, I can't pay the activities fee. So I think I'm asking not the finance committee, more the administration. I think we can do better by this. I think we have to, and we have to allow families who need help to have a place, know where to go and be able to do it discreetly and privately.
I think one more thing I'd like to add. I think it's important that in this process, we take a more organized approach. So in terms, we should be targeting, we're looking for revenue of X to offset increasing amounts that we're paying in other parts of the budget for provision of these services. This is going to include, a portion of it will be activity fees, a portion of it will be rentals, a portion of it will be advertising, selling ads at Cougar Field or whatnot. But rather than attacking each one separately, and it does, I hear your point, maybe we need to at least do a quick and dirty on the activity fee first, but it just seems a more logical approach to start with an end goal and then work backwards and try to manage the process that way.
Understood. I'll wait for July. I just didn't want to lose an entire year
Fair
because we
enough.
can't get our act together.
Fair.
If you can do a quick and dirty with the promise of a quick and dirty, and we're going to really do the deep dive analysis over the year.
I think the problem with that, in all honesty, is from our activity fees generate how much in revenue right now?
The activity is approximately $100,000.
All right, so the question is where's the massive bang for our buck? Is it more activity fees, or is it better utilization of our resources from the advertising side of the world? We have.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but it is different if we have the capabilities of generating significant dollars from either advertising or utilization fees of our resources, which would allow us to offset and potentially keep costs to the parents lower, then I think that needs to be understood. Because if we can if we have a $500,000 figure, and we realize we can get, and we do the analysis, we get $400,000 of it through advertising and auditorium fee, all that, usage fees, then it allows us to keep that figure at current rates. So there is, some aspect of that we don't understand in terms of what can we generate off of our existing facilities. In particular, the auditoriums, which are going to be air conditioned, which is a massive game changer for, and a differentiator from what's available to the market right now. So there's, I think a lot of things that need to be, thought through and addressed before we go and just jump the gun on, activity fees. And I do agree with Michelle, because I would say there's got to be one person that's in charge of it, or we basically say everybody has to have their money done by September 30th, and it's not done. I think then we actually have to be proactive in going out to people and saying, are you okay? We could look at it from that perspective as well. some people won't be embarrassed if they get that question.
Well, we also don't want people not to sign up or not to participate and not to do a sport or multi-sports because they can't afford. And that's why I think if our system was more synchronized and more respectful and private and not loosey-goosey, like we'll help you if you need help, which I think intentions are there, and absolutely we do. Any kid who can't pay for a field trip or whatever, it's taken care of. But I just think we need to look from a different lens. The other thing, I mean, the activity fee is an annual fee. You know, if we have to look at it this year and we don't know that we can actually rent our auditoriums, we have never tried to really advertise. So we have to kind of vet that out this year and see what can we do and get. So we may have to raise the activity fee this year to kind of keep things, to be able to pay for them, and see what can we get in terms of advertising, and perhaps the following year bring that activity fee back down. You know, if we can see that we are able to balance it out on the other side.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Was the activity fee at one point supposed to be $150?
It was at one point, and
It
then the
was.
following year it was lowered to $100.
Yes.
Okay. So it
Yeah,
wouldn't
so
be
it's
without
kind of- we
precedent to
can- yeah.
raise it?
Correct.
All right,
Originally, the first year it was enacted, it was 150, and the subsequent year it was 100.
thank you, Joe.
Do $100 a kid in like an increment if you play 4 sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just
you
don't
know?
want to be sitting on money.
That's the formula that you're trying to come up with right now.
Okay, great. Okay, so you think you'll have a little bit more come July, the July meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
We've got a couple of good things coming your way by July.
What's the date of the July meeting? 16th?
16th. Okay. Any additional questions or comments regarding any of the finance or facilities items, either for Matt or anybody else on the finance committee? No. Policy and planning, Mr. Arnott?
Policy and planning has not met since our last meeting. We met right before the last meeting 2 weeks ago, and there will be an action item, D1, which you'll see in the agenda later on tonight.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Moving over to the liaison reports, I just want to report out that my Borough Council liaison counterpart mentioned that their finance committee meets in August. So if we're going to go back out and ask for additional funds or shared funds from the municipalities as it relates to security of the school buildings, the Borough Finance Committee starts to meet in August for 2019. Peter, since you work down the hall from the township, is it possible for you to find out when? I could email Mayor Ritter, but since you work down the hall from Tom, I thought it might be easier. If not,
Give me a reason to go visit.
yeah, there you go. If not, I'll just shoot Mayor Ritter an email and ask him the same question. But just keep in mind, Finance Committee for the board, the borough starts working on their budget in August of this year for essentially what is January of 2019. Ms. Clark, for the township?
Nothing to report from the township.
Okay, thank you. Athletic Boosters has not met.
Correct.
They will not meet again until the beginning of the year. Performing Arts Boosters, Mr. Arnott?
Thank you, Jill. The Chatham High School All-State Chorus members have begun rehearsals in prep for their November performances in Atlantic City and NJPAC. And we'd like to congratulate and thank the Chatham High School Band and Choir members who performed beautifully at the 2018 graduation ceremonies and baccalaureate last week. It was really fantastic. Marching Band will have a couple of rehearsals during July and August. They start up. The program is going to be called the Witching Hour, and if you follow marching band, specifically our marching band under Brian Conti's direction, it's always extremely unique. The music is very intricate, and it just blows you away when you see it alongside of so many other great teams and programs that they compete against throughout the season. So I'm looking forward to see that. Additionally, the Chatham High School Theater Department will be presenting Radium Girls November 15th through 17th in the new auditorium. So Radium Girls is a New Jersey story. You should...
About the radium that they used to use on watches.
Painting on
and it caused cancer.
Cause cancer. And if you remember, I can't remember if it was middle school or high school, but I know my son
High school.
was in, I think Billy was in Radium Girls a while back.
God, 7 years ago?
Yeah.
They did a great job. But it is a local story, which is interesting.
All right, a couple of other quick notes, Jill. Chatham Performing Arts Boosters had a great year under the leadership of Jill Horowitz, who will remain president next year. She was fantastic this year, and she's aggressive in fundraising and thinking outside the box, so we're very lucky to have her. And also, Barbara Klemp wants to thank the board and pass on her thanks to the board and administration, and wish us all the best in the coming year. And I'd just like to tip the cap to Barbara for someone who, for decades, has really done an incredible job advocating for the students.
Yeah, she's retiring, for those that don't know. Dr. Klump has been teaching for 30 years, but she also went to Southern Boulevard School as a student and through the district. I won't say the year because I don't want to give it away. But thank you, Sal.
Sal, can I just mention something? I had the privilege of attending the Lafayette Outdoor Concert, which they did for the second year in a row this year. And I have to say that they do a great job, and they set it up, and I was really impressed with the level of commitment that the children showed, and it was just so nice to be outside. It was a lovely evening, and I thank the people who put that together, the teachers and the children. They were tremendous, and I really enjoyed that night.
Thank you, Mary.
Hopefully we'll double the attendance next year. Very good, thank you. Mr. Arnott, moving on to Chatham Education Foundation, Ms. Kenny?
I don't have anything to report.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Gilfillan for Chatham Rec?
Nothing to report?
And PTO District Cabinet has not met, correct?
Correct.
They already had their end. Okay, very good. I make a motion to pass the minutes for the public and executive session from June 11th, 2018.
Second.
Peter, can you remind us?
President Jones.
Oh, wow.
More President.
Okay, very good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
For the record, pass 9-0.
Thank you, Peter. We have our first opportunity for public commentary. If you wouldn't mind stepping up to the mic, introducing yourself, and if you could sign in, there's a piece of paper there.
I know.
Good evening, Bill Heap. First thing I'd like to do is open up the credit where credit is due file. I attended the ECLC graduation about a week and a half ago, and Mrs. Camano, I hope I have that pronunciation right, was there to present diplomas to the students. 3 or 4 graduated. There were only 2 other districts that bothered to send representatives to the graduation, and it was a little bit disheartening. Those kids work hard, and I think they deserve official representation, and so it was nice to see that we took the time to send people to represent the district. I think it shows what kind of community Chatham is, so I thank everybody that was responsible for that. Second thing is with regard to Dr. Lasousa's presentation on the fact that Chatham is up in the stratosphere. The JCs are big supporters of mission trips that occur during the summer. And this coming week, most of the churches are going to send kids to various parts of the country. Chatham Presbyterian, Chatham Methodist, Gloria Dei, St. Paul's, and St. Pat's will all send groups of teenagers down to various locations to do some house building and various other things. And it really gives the kids a chance to see, I was going to say how the other half lives, but really how the other 95% of the world lives. And I think, having gone myself for 6 or 7 summers, I think the kids are really affected by it. It gives them another reference point other than Chatham to store in the back of their minds for when they make decisions and judgments about things. Okay, on to some business. I have a question about activity fees. I'm a fan of activity fees, but are they road tested from a legal perspective? Is it okay to implement an activity fee?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep, it's not something that somebody's going to institute a lawsuit about and say it's unfair and...
I can't promise that, but many districts have activity fees in place. We're one of them, and I know that you can't eliminate all of your extracurricular programs and have a strictly pay-as-you-go, plan in place. You can impose nominal activity fees.
Okay, so other districts do it, and it's not, shouldn't be a problem. Okay,
far as
that's
I know.
fine. I'm a fan of it. I think that they should be imposed. And I have a question about guns in schools. And this is not a question that has to be answered right away, but going forward, as you collect the facts and come to some sort of decision, I'm wondering if you will be able to tell me the protocol for having community input in this decision that may or may not come down the road. I would like to really know what you plan to do on that, and whether this is going to be a top-down command decision, or is it going to be a bottom-up decision? Who wins in the battle between experts and what the community may want? Because I think that it's as much of a philosophical question as it is anything else. So if you can kind of think about that and get back to me sometime and let me know how you plan to do that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening, Stuart Carr, 3 Crestwood Drive. A couple of questions. One, Mr. Ryan had asked made some comments with Mr. Tequila, I believe the last meeting or the meeting before that, concerning the school health insurance fund and the assessment rates, et cetera. Did we ever get back with the answers to Mr. Ryan's questions? I wasn't sure if you had tied that down or where that is at this point. Seemed like an interesting dialogue.
Yes, we did, and they were they were supplied to the entire board. The insurance broker was not filing an errors and omission claim to recoup the reduced commission funds for the life that they are the broker,
Okay.
or the duration that they are the broker.
So, set with that. Thank you on that. Other question, primarily Mr. Gilfillan, wanted to check in on my question of a few months ago about the idea of a public question, non-binding public question for capital reserve account dispensation or capital reserve account allocations for non-deferred maintenance, non-routine maintenance items. So you want to build a new building, you want to do something like that, say $2 million and up, have a non-binding public question before that money goes out of the capital reserve account. Any discussion on a best practice about that at this point?
No, it hasn't, but Pete, we can put that on the next one. We need to look at it also, we need to ask the lawyers first as to whether or not that's something we can do.
Sure. Again, a non-binding question, but just again to be able to get some formal public input into that process.
Formal and public input doesn't really have to come from a non-binding, we can do a survey. We can do a lot of different ways. I mean, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
There are certain things to me that are of such drastic decision-making, whatever you want to look at it from our perspective, that I'm the believer in that there are certain things that if they're important enough that we need to get public input of them beyond just simply a bi-monthly meeting. That we would go try to get more public input from them if we deem it to be important enough. We don't make too many decisions above $2 million that we're not, in essence, done to a referendum as far as I can tell.
Well, we have a central office building as one example that was done north of $2 million, and there was a survey that was done with that specifically indicated we don't want you to spend the money on that, which is why when you actually did the second referendum and had the 6 questions, the question about doing a central office building was not included. And I recognize the termites and whatever else with the lack of supervision on that over time. But putting that aside, there was a survey, and there was north of $2 million. And the public said, don't do it, and you did it. And that's the reason for having at least a formal question process.
But listen, Stu, just because some people say don't do it doesn't mean everyone's saying don't do it. So
60% said don't do it. But in any case, just having a non-binding referendum when you're having, again, a material allocation of...
I don't remember that number, but in all honesty, to me, if people had such an issue with what we were doing, and there was a lot of thought and years put into that process, then I would have preferred that a lot more people stood up like you're doing and had come to these bi-monthly meetings and been more vocal about it versus just a simple survey. That's my opinion.
And I agree that the simple survey wasn't adequate because clearly it was done and it wasn't listened to. but I think a formal voting process would, again, bring that into more focus. For, again, just numbers north of a certain amount, because, again, if you had to go out and do that with a borrowing, you would have had to go and get permission. And I'm simply saying, forget about the source of the funds. If you're going to use the funds for a specific purpose, north of a certain amount, there should be public input. And your out would be, if it's non-binding, you can say, we're the experts, we disagree. But at least there will be formal input as opposed to surveys that, in this case, weren't adequately paid attention to, in my mind.
Okay, you can look into that from number one, legal perspective and on the next agenda for the 17th.
And again, presumably non-binding should give you some kind of latitude.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. Thanks so much.
Any additional public commentary? We're running out of public. Okay. We're going to move on to the regular agenda, starting with personnel.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny, would you mind?
Yes, I'd like to move action items A1 to A21 for vote.
Second.
Thank you.
Just want to make a couple of statements. As I mentioned earlier, we are in the process of ensuring that we're staffed for next year, so you see a lot of appointments of teaching staff members, including those, many of those included in the budget for this coming year. And we also have two special appointments, and both of those gentlemen are with us tonight. Just like last year when we had vacancies in mathematics and world languages at the supervisory level, this year we have two openings in special education and in performing arts and special district programs. And we initiated a process about 2 months ago to find the very best candidates for those two positions. Between the two of them, we had about 150 applicants, and Ms. Grant, Ms. Chase, and Dr. D'Elia screened candidates they thought might merit consideration on our part. We ended up bringing back to a committee, and I thank Ms. Kenny and Ms. Weber for sitting in on each of the committees respectively. But we brought 12 or 15 candidates or so back for committee rounds, and then we advanced finalists on to me, and in one case Dr. D'Elia, in one case Ms. Chase. So at this point, we have come to very enthusiastically recommend two candidates for your approval tonight. One is Evan Jaffe for the special education position, and the other is James Lawrence for the performing arts position. James works up in Bergen County at the present time. He's been there for 8 years. He's got a stellar music background, including being in a Big Ten marching band, which is something not everyone can say. But he's been director of bands up in Westwood schools for the past 8 years, and we're just delighted he performed very well during the interview process. His references couldn't say enough kind things about him, so we're excited to have him join the team, and I know he's got a meeting scheduled tomorrow morning with Ms. Chase, so he'll be hitting the ground running. And on the special education side of the fence, we have Dr. Evan Jaffe. He is currently in a nearby school district right down the road, and before that was also up in Bergen County. And likewise, Dr. Jaffe emerged as the strongest candidate in a very, 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 very strong pool of special education professionals. And he was really a pleasure to speak with during the interview process, and it was amazing how diverse his level of interactions has been with not only students, but infants whom he was working with, diagnosing with autism potentially, and senior citizens who he was working with in a group home setting. So just an incredible breadth of experiences. So we're really excited to bring both of them on board. We thank them for being patient as they've listened to me drone on in the beginning of this meeting, and welcome aboard, fellas.
Welcome, both of you. Congratulations. I didn't know if you wanted to say a few words, or you don't have to. You don't have to. It's just, welcome aboard. And Dr. Jaffe, you're coming in tomorrow morning, or Mr. Lawrence, you are? Wow, no grass is growing under your feet. Excellent. Well, we look forward to you, and maybe after your first 100 days or so, you can kind of report back to us and let us know what your thoughts are on the district and how you're getting along, and fresh set of eyes, what we could be doing better. We'd appreciate your input and your thoughts. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Lawrence or Dr. Jaffe? Well, welcome aboard. Excellent. Any additional items, Dr. LaSousa?
That's it for me.
On personnel, do you plan on wrapping up the majority of the selection by the next meeting?
That's the goal.
Okay. True. It's been seconded, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Does anybody have any additional questions for Ms. Grant or Dr. LaSousa or Mr. Lawrence or Dr. Jaffe? No? Good? Mary, good? Mike? Okay, very good. Peter, do you mind?
Agenda items A1 through A21. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 9-0.
Excellent.
Congratulations, Mr. Jaffe and Ms. Clark.
Well done. We're almost done. We're almost done, but we won't be excited if you
Yeah, you guys can skedaddle now.
speak out. You really don't have to, but thank you, congratulations, welcome to the district. Good luck. You know we're up in the top right-hand corner, right, on that slide? Our students, just remember the stratosphere on the right. No pressure. Matt, moving along to finance and facilities.
Yes, I'd like to move action items B1 through 20 on your regular agenda.
I'll second it.
A number of thank yous, the athletic boosters, donating another $2,600 for the purchase of a football end zone camera. We are thanking a gentleman by the name of Mr. Anonymous, who's making a donation to the high school in the amount of $2,000 for a high school assembly and parent presentation in October 2018 by Michael Guilleon of Steer Straight. This is part of our
Wellness.
no, but we do, speaker series we've been promoting for the last number of years. Are we upping that from 3 to 4, or is this filling in, paying for one of the 3, or?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
Okay, we'll take it.
I think this arose out of what Lisa and Alex have been doing, and I think this was a parent who probably saw this program as well and decided to donate, to bring this fellow in.
That's very thoughtful.
A great shout out, because these things don't happen very often, but an individual donation from Mr. and Mrs. Brian Vergulis, am I pronouncing that correctly? Margulies. A $10,000 check to be used at discretion of the middle school principal. I would imagine that's due to their incredible experience that their children had while they were at the middle school, and wanted to thank them in some way. Whatever, that's a fantastic.
That is exactly what they wrote in their letter, actually.
Oh,
that right?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
That's amazing.
Do they have more children coming? No.
And that's
And I think we need to shout that to everyone in Chatham, that all their children, when they have fantastic experiences, can be writing checks to the Education Foundation from Ms. Kenny and her group, or directly to the schools. We'll take them either way. A Southern Boulevard did donation from the PTO of almost $30,000 for a number of different things, ranging from a library projector system to the biggest one, which is an audio-visual system for the gym. I can't thank the parents enough in this town for what they do from a PTO perspective and donating things when they're required. And last but not least, I'm not quite sure if it's the last one, from the Head of Education Foundation, donation to Washington Avenue School in the amount of $9,300 for the purchase of flexible furniture for the school.
Unbelievable. We're extremely fortunate. Matt, the presentation that the parent is paying for, that gentleman, Mike, I know he spoke to the parents at the high school. He met with the middle schoolers, or only with the parents?
I don't know the details.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I thought he said
what
he
that
talked to
plan
the middle
was.
schoolers, and there was a desire to get him in to talk to the high schoolers, and that's why this parent stepped forward to pay the speaker.
There definitely was a desire to bring him into the high school.
To the high school.
And even they were kicking it around for the end of this school year, but they couldn't make that happen.
But, yeah, our student assistance counselors have been fantastic bringing in those types of programs and awareness about the vaping and the drugs and what's considered a gateway drug. And this guy was phenomenal. His presentation was scary, but phenomenal, very impactful. So I'm happy somebody stepped forward, and the high schoolers will get a chance to see him as well. Any additional questions for finance and facilities across the board? Anything for Matt or Peter? Nothing.
Steered straight, not steered straight.
Yeah, steered straight. He's an ex-con, actually. He has an interesting background and an interesting delivery in his presentation. Peter, would you mind doing a
Not
roll
at
call?
all. Agenda items B1 through B20. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 9-0.
Excellent. Moving on to curriculum, Mrs. Ciccarelli?
Yes, I'd like to move agenda items C1 and C2 for vote on the regular agenda.
Second?
Second it? There's a second? Thank you, Mike.
Yes.
Can't really discuss anything of that, so does anybody have any questions on just the policy regarding that? Because we can't just discuss the specifics. Okay. Peter, would you mind?
Agenda items C1 and C2. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 9-0.
Policy, Mr. Arnock?
I'd like to move action item D1.
Second?
Peter, just a question on procedure. Typically, when we change a regulation and a policy, there's a corresponding regulation or policy, but in this instance, you're changing the regulation but not the policy, and the policy and not the regulation for these two items? Typically, they go hand in hand, but I'm just not seeing that tonight.
Well, for the regulation, we have a policy in place already.
That is not changing?
That's not changing.
Okay.
But we needed more detail around the regulation according to the two supervisors that kind of deal with this sort of thing.
And the regulation did not impact our policy at all?
We didn't have a regulation before, I don't believe. I think we only had a policy on 7432.
7432?
Right, there was no regulation before.
Okay.
So we had a policy, but we didn't have some of the level of detail that the supervisors thought was appropriate for a regulation.
Okay.
And the policy was just an update from Strauss Esme, incorporating new language in the, whatever changes there have been in the law. So that's an update to our policy.
Is it significantly different than what we've been doing in the past?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think some of the names of, titles and
Oh, I understand.
things like
Okay.
that, it was not a super
Substantive.
involved set of changes, I don't think.
Okay. That we had been doing something
That-
incredibly wrong prior with missing children. There's nothing substantive?
No.
Okay. Okay. Any questions on policy or regulation? Peter?
Sure. Agenda item D1. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Valenti?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda item D1 passes 9-0.
Excellent. And we're now at our opportunity for board business. As I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we had queued up two items. One was starting to vet out additional school safety as it relates to Class 3 officers. And the second was the opportunity for the piece of property that the board was presented with recently to the right of the high school. So why don't we just take them one at a time and talk about school security. As I mentioned, I'm going to start with the newest members and work our way in. Ms. Chambers, if you don't mind kicking us off, then I'll go over to Mr. Ryan and just alternate.
Be happy to, Mrs. Weber.
Very good. Again, we just want to make sure we're either all on the same page, we're moving in the right direction, we have a direction, and it was just easier to have this conversation in public rather than, we've had a few sessions, Mr. Valenti's spearheading it, but now let's, and I don't think it's a one-time conversation, but
Absolutely.
here we go.
I think it's a very important question. I believe, as myself, that I want to protect our student body as best we can. If you look at the totality of our community, at any one time between Labor Day and graduation in June, that is the most of our citizens in one place at one time. And I believe as a community, we should come together and decide this question. I am the voice of one. I think this is too big of a matter for me alone to make that call, and I would recommend going to some sort of a survey or a non-binding question to really feel what the community wants. because I think we as a community, we are 2 towns, 1 school district, and I think that we need to make sure that if we are going to do this, we have the majority of support from our both communities.
If I missed it, I apologize. What is your opinion as your one person?
As my one person is, I think that we need,
You're one person in that seat.
I am one person in the seat, and I think we should go to the community and ask them before we finalize anything as a board.
Yeah, no, as a board, but as you as an individual board member, do you have an opinion one way or the other?
I think that if our town decides that they would want to see Class 3 officers in the schools, I would support that.
Okay, so you don't have an opinion or will to share right now, just whatever the majority is.
I believe that that's what I should do as a board member. I think this is too big for my opinion alone.
Mr. Ryan? Oh, sorry, my mic's not on. Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, I agree primarily with what Mary said. Obviously, we want to protect the kids as much as we can. I struggle with whether or not having Class 3 officers in the schools actually makes the school a target versus it being more safe. And I think it's a tremendous cost that we can spend with it and have a greater impact by adding, strengthening, and broadening some of our current mental health programs and procedures. And I think anything we do should be put forth to the public for a vote. So right now, without further discussion, I think we need to we've had committee discussions, and I don't know if I've spoken to every single person on the board about the issue, or that the board has discussed it in totality. But right now, sitting here, I'd have to say no, that I'm not for it. But as Mary said, I think if the public wants it, I would support it.
Mr. Valenti?
I want to just make a few statements. I think that, well, I know that having a Class 3 officer in the schools is not an end-all security solution. So I want to be on a record and, put that out there. It is not the ultimate solution. It could be a last line and the only line of defense should we have an incident. And obviously, as a former professional law enforcement executive, I think that whenever you have dedicated resources to a venue with professionals, with professional guidelines in place, and more resources, it's always good for not only the venue, i.e. the school, but the community at large, because it frees officers up for other things. It gives the school other tools, and generally it's a good thing, but it is not an end-all solution. But I do think that a Class 3 officer properly trained and in uniform in the schools is not a bad thing, and I think that it's a positive thing. I agree with my 2 board members. I think that we should have community involvement in this issue because it is a volatile issue and it's a personal issue. But if you look at security in general and our society in general, we have cameras in public places, we have uniformed police officers, we've gone through a tremendous amount of change nationally over the last 15 years because of events in our country and overseas. So I have a 9th grader in high school. I don't think it's a bad thing that our children and my daughter is exposed to a uniformed police officer. I think it's a positive thing. We have school safety officers in the schools now. I think that additional resources working with those school safety officers gives us more tools to potentially address a situation that could be critical or could be the only last line of defense, depending on what may or may not play out. I think Mr. Heap's statements at the last board meeting were very eloquent, and I'm not in disagreement with him on the odds of something happening, but we've lived through these events, and we're living through them as a nation. We don't know the odds. We can't predict the odds. We don't know what's going to happen. So at the end of the day, I think it's better to be safe, prepared, proactive, and again, you need to approach this issue holistically. This is a small piece, okay? But I'm a proponent for the Class 3 officer. But I do not believe that having that officer is the end-all solution to this problem. This is a deep, complex problem, and it has to be approached holistically. It's as I was told several weeks ago from someone who's lived through this very closely up in Sandy Hook. This is a brain health issue, and it's a national issue. So that's my feeling, Jill.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. Arno?
Jill and fellow board members, this is a tough one, and my mind's already been changed about 4 or 5 times since we started discussing this, and I'm not embarrassed saying that. So my initial feelings was I was absolutely against having firearms and Class 3 officers in the schools, and part of it is wanting to cling to a more Pollyanna. If we can't cling to Pollyanna in Chatham, where can we cling to Pollyanna? So that's my initial feel. However, I do know that there are people with a lot more experience than myself in this field. For example, you, Mr. Valenti, and other uniformed and other experts that the board's been in contact with. So I certainly wouldn't discount. In other words, my mind would be open when we start talking about this in a more serious fashion. Well, this is pretty drop-dead serious, actually. But right here, it seems like we're fleshing it out. We're not making any decisions tonight. So I don't know where I would fall. And I don't know where I'd fall, whether it should be in the public domain for the public to make the decision or for the administration to make the decision. Because on one hand, I don't want to be responsible for something, God forbid, that happens, and I made a decision, and boy, if only you would, as a board, agreed for this, you could have forestalled it. I would never want that on my conscience, but at the same time, so that's for having the public have a say. But in general, mobs don't always make the right decision anyway. Okay, that's why there are. I'm going to not get political. I see the wisdom in hiring the very best people and entrusting them and winding them up and letting them go as well. So I've told you nothing in this long speech, and I've changed my mind a few times, but I'll be open-minded and I'll discuss further.
And you reserve the right to change your mind again.
That's straight.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes, I mean, I have to echo Sal's comment that I'm really on the fence about this. At the beginning, it's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of having police officers being a guarantee that this is the best, our kids will definitively be safe if we were to take this course of action. And so I guess echoing what, Mary started off saying is that I think it's bigger than us in terms of the board, that it would have to go, because there's a big cost associated with having Class 3 officers, if that's the choice, that I would love to, I think we would need to get the validation from the public. Because I mean, at this point, the kids are not in any immediate danger, and if that were the case, we could make that choice. But since there's not, in my opinion, the kids are going to be safe going to school tomorrow, and if in the process of the next developments over the next year, if we're able to get people on board, if that's what the community wants, I'd be in support of that.
Ms. Chicarelli?
I mean, I do agree with a lot of the opinions in the sense that it is a holistic, it needs to be a holistic approach, and yes, we do need to get some feedback from the community, but I also think that, you know, nobody guarantees that anybody's safe tomorrow. Nobody guarantees we're safe walking out into this parking lot. So my feeling is, you know, you look at all these other school shootings, all of those kids and all of those parents thought their kids were safe to go to school that day. These didn't happen in, you know, horrific neighborhoods, and, you know, many of these situations have happened in communities very similar to Chatham, and I think we are doing a disservice by thinking that it's not going to happen to us. I think that's a ridiculous approach in my personal opinion. I think, sure, there's no guarantee. That doesn't mean that our kids are going to be safe if we have a Class 3 officer in the school. However, I think that if in fact it were we're supported by the community and supported by the administration, and, you know, as a whole, I think we would be doing our children a disservice by not offering a trained professional in the school as a, you know, preventative issue. So for me personally, I am in favor of it if in fact it is supported. Like, you know, like Sal said, I don't want to be that one that says, you know, listen, I made this decision and 80% of the parents are uncomfortable, afraid to send their kids to school because there's a gun in the school. However, you know, I think on the flip side, and obviously you can't make anybody's decision for them, but, you know, I think parents should be aware that, you know, yeah, we live in a great community and we have so many positive things going, but nobody's really safe always. You know, you can't guarantee anybody's safe. So I think we need to, you know, further discuss. I think it's not a cut and dry thing, but I also think that, you know, it's a very important one to know that, you know, none of us ever expect any of these horrible things to happen, and they happen to regular, really good, well-educated, affluent people. Doesn't make us safe because we live in Chatham.
Thank you, Ann. Michelle?
I definitely have grappled with this back and forth, and I have a different perspective working in a school each day. I think I hold on to the fact that schools are safe places, that children should come to school, teachers should be safe, children should be safe. And you know, the more things happen, I think this is sadly the reality that we live in now. And in my opinion, we have a responsibility as a board to our community, to our teachers, to our staff members, and to our students to have the safest place for them to go each day. And if it means having Class 3 officers in our buildings to help secure our buildings in a different way, not to say that one person can prevent a tragedy. One person could deter a tragedy, one person could stop that tragedy from possibly being worse. Could. I said could. I said could. Could. And in my mind, if we could do that, then I support it, because when you have 500, 800, 1,000 kids in a building, along with staff, and I know people who work in corporations where they have armed officers in their buildings, and they scan in each day, and they go into their office. What makes us any different? You know, and my feeling is it has to be handled the right way. The individuals would need very targeted, specific training, and know how to interact within our schools, with our students, with our staff. We don't have the money right now to do it, so we're talking about it. We don't have the ability to do it. I would like to get public input. I don't know that I would want this as a second question, because if something, God forbid, were to happen, it puts the board in a difficult spot and the community in a different spot. I think with public input, be it through a survey or however, maybe hold an open meeting just to discuss this period, just this issue, and get public input to help guide us in our decision making. But at the end of the day, we are elected officials who are put in our position to make decisions. And sometimes the decisions are hard to make. We don't have to agree on them. And if we vote on them, maybe as a board, or based on the input that we get to help us guide our decision-making. But I think it is a very, very difficult decision to make, but I think when it comes to safety, it's something that we need to explore and that we have to see. I am disappointed that the borough and the township will not share in the responsibility of the cost. I feel like I myself am a taxpayer in the township. I pay my municipal taxes, and my money also goes to the school, and to me, that looks like double dipping. If they have the ability to share in this and share their resources in terms of officers, I wish they'd be more willing to do that. But if they're not, then, and the public says this is what they want, I think we could do more to support this safety in our schools. I think a Class 3 officer would be the right step.
Thank you, Michelle. Matt, how say you?
This is an issue that keeps me up at night. I think that my biggest issue with this whole process is the fact that it disgusts me that we even have to be speaking about this degradation of society over the last 25 years that we're in this position. You know, as a board member, you look at things differently, I believe, when you read the news every day, and you just look at things that go on in this country, and you can reflect upon what you would do if you were a member of that Board of Education, and reflecting on how those Board of Education members are looking at the incidents that happen within their school districts. And the biggest one you always see is teenage suicide. And whenever that happens, I sit there and say to myself, do we as a board, or we as a school district, doing everything we can to have positioned ourselves to potentially have done more, stopped it, made a difference in that person's life? And I look at this almost in the same way, whereby, in my opinion, it is our responsibility, if we have the resources, that we put in place every single thing that we can do to protect our children from all different things, all the different issues that are affecting society. I mean, personally, I understand that there's a bigger risk, and I find more fear in life than my child leaving in the morning and getting behind the wheel of a car. But at that point, again, you have to reflect and say, have I done everything I possibly can to make sure that he's in a safe spot, or my daughter or future is in a safe spot? Have we educated them enough? Have we told them and shown them issues in terms of not speeding or putting yourself in a bad position? You know, it's constantly, have we done enough? Have we taught them enough? Have we given them all the resources they need to remain safe? It is my opinion that Class 3 officers would be valuable in our school systems, because I think, again, it does go back to the mindset is, if everything is available to them, we provide it to them. This is, from what I said before, this is one of those hotspot issues that I believe it's beyond these 9 members of the board. I think in the end we have to make the final decision. And I think this is something that, and I would hope that the members of our 2 towns would come up and make their opinions vocal to us, and and help us in terms of where we need to make that decision. But you know, after a lot of reflection, my opinion is, if we have resources and if we have the capabilities to deliver the maximum amount we can from a safety perspective, we should do it.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. And I'll just briefly share my opinion as well. I agree. I'm just going to pick on Mr. Valenti, that I personally believe it's a positive thing, but part of a holistic approach. To Ann's point, we're never going to know what tragedy was averted by having a Class 3 officer there. We have over 2,000 students on the Lafayette High School campus alone. Having an additional set of eyes on those students, I'm not even talking about an active shooter drill, I'm considering the vaping, the suicide, literally just having another set of eyes on 2,000 students at, for example, that one campus alone. The middle school has 900 students on that campus. I just don't think that it's a bad thing, and to Matt's point, anything that we can do to make sure they're the safest, the students are safest, the staff is safest, is a positive thing. When it comes to cost, it's about $50,000 per Class 3 officer. That includes the training, the uniform, ongoing training. Is that between $50,000 and $55,000? So that's the cost. We keep saying it's, it's very expensive, and I just wanted to quantify that, $50,000 a year. We may get additional funds from the state if the state aid shakes out. The township and the borough did indicate no, they were not in a position to help fund, and I just want to clarify that. We were catching them at the end of their budget season, which is why I mentioned that the borough begins their finance committee in August, and we should go back again and ask them if they're able to help share in the costs. I don't know when the township starts, but I assume it's a similar time frame as they have to file. The municipalities have the same filing schedule. So the short answer is I believe that it would be a positive thing to have another set of eyes on our students. And again, we'll never know what tragedy was averted because there happens to be a gentleman or an officer rather, could be a female, at the door. I'm curious, this is not the end of the conversation, this is the beginning. So I didn't want anybody to think this is one and done. This is just the opening conversation, and it may go on for weeks and months and possibly years, who knows. I do want to ask the board, do they think it would be helpful to hear from, I know Chief Henley is retiring, but he's been fairly vocal. Would it be helpful to ask or invite Chief Henley if he would be able to address the board? And I don't know if he's willing or able, and I know he's retiring soon and has accepted a position someplace else, but I'm asking the board, is that something that they would find helpful if we should extend an invitation?
Yes.
Sal says yes.
100%.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
The more the merrier. The more inputs, the better.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
like the idea
I do too.
of doing a special session when they
I
know
love
that
that,
this is
Michelle.
going to be on the agenda and we're going to be talking specifically to this. I think this place will be packed.
Okay, that was one question. The second question is there an appetite to maybe showcase our new auditorium and possibly do an open dialogue there as we did previously
Yes.
for the large referendum? I mean, we have a couple of regulars here, but we don't have the majority. If we,
There's no downside in moving it. If we have it and 10 people come, great. If we have it and 300 people come,
great.
I think there's no
Okay.
downside.
I was just, I just wanted to ask if there's, maybe showcase the new auditorium when it's open. So, Dr. LaSousa, could you invite Chief Henley? Again, if he can't make it, I understand. I know he's retiring. If he declines, no hard feelings. I just think it would be helpful to maybe hear, Mr. Valenti has, 3 decades in law enforcement, but maybe Chief Henley, who's familiar with our schools and the, the towns at large, and he's been here for so many years. And if you would, Dr. LaSousa, if you'd like to add anything to the dialogue, please feel free to do that tonight. If you're not comfortable tonight and you want to prepare, that's fine as well. We could pick it up in July. We could talk about this every meeting until we're done talking about it, however long that takes.
Sure. First off, of course, I defer to the board. So whatever the board, nothing happens without the board's approval, right? So I defer to the direction that you take. I'll just mention one or two things that struck me as I was listening. The first is I just want to be clear that there are police and guns in our schools every day. Every single day, at least as they're available, both the borough police and the Chatham Township Police patrol our schools. They come into the schools. They stay at the schools sometimes for 30 minutes or an hour if they're having to deal with something else. So I don't want anyone to be confused and think that we have some kind of police are not, are prohibited from entering the, the campus if they have a firearm. All of the principals, every other superintendent administrator I know want the police in the schools frequently because we believe that they serve a real purpose, and like Mr. Valenti said, it's a healthy thing for that type of community policing, and it supports all of the drills that we do, all of the work that we do. Our middle school was hosting today the borough police for active shooter and other drills. So we have a very long tradition of working closely with the police, and we have the police in our school buildings on a regular basis now. And the only request that I ever have to, channel from the principals is that they want them there more often. Second, There's a reason why Governor Christie and the legislature at the time made it easier for boards to employ Class 3 officers. It used to be much more difficult and much more expensive. It's much easier now. And the reason for that is that they were acting upon a recommendation from a task force report that was issued about 5 years ago. And it was a joint report from the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Education that recommended, as one of their key recommendations, police presence all of the time in every school. That has proven to be largely challenging or impossible maybe for many school districts. Not all school districts have a police officer present at every school building, but many school districts, if not the majority, have at least one police officer present at least one building in the district. So they have a police officer who is a Class 3 or a school resource officer who helps to coordinate security and safety measures within the school district. I certainly support that. I would support more than one Class 3 officer or school resource officer. I think there's a significant difference between having an active duty uniformed police officer with a firearm in a school setting and someone else who is not an active police officer. So just to be clear, I'm as big a proponent for the Class 3 officer presence in our schools as anybody would be.
Okay, great. Thank you. And you'll follow up and invite Chief Henley?
Yes.
Thank you. Any additional conversation tonight? Again, not the end of the conversation.
Yeah,
Sure.
a couple of quick points. First of all, I think everyone in the audience and up here, I think is thoughtful and I think cares about the students. I don't think anyone's doing a cost-benefit analysis, okay? We want Class 3 officers there if it's the right thing to do. And if the funds aren't there here, we'll find the funds, okay? It's either the right thing to do or it's not. The things that I want to hear, I want to know if, what happens if there's some incident and there's collateral damage. Officer such and such tries to shoot Johnny and he shoots Sarah and he shoots someone else. It's a new danger and I would like to hear more expert testimony about so we can assess these things. And I bring it up because, the public should hear that it's not as simple, oh, a Class 3 officer, that means they'll be safe. There's other things to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Sal, that's a great question, and just to give you a little color and feedback on that, unfortunately, and you see it in the headlines, you see it on the news every day, whenever there's an incident, when a police officer has to use deadly physical force, he or she, weapon, there's always that possibility that because it's a high-stress situation, they have seconds to act with very little information or no information, just what they see unfolding, and that's always going to happen. And we could have all the discussion in the world, but when you have an incident that gets to that level, there are no guarantees ever, because it's an unusual incident. It's not a routine incident. It's the worst situation a police officer could be put in, having to use their weapon and fire it. So even the most highly trained officers make mistakes, as we see every day. So because it's not a natural event to take a gun out and use it to protect yourself or someone else. So I just want to add that, and I know you know that, but I think we forget it because we've become numb to kind of the media and the things happening out there. So it's just such a complex situation, and even people who are highly trained and do this for a living every day make a lot of mistakes. And Superintendent LaSousa mentioned community policing, and that's a whole nother aspect of some of the benefits that you have when you put a uniformed police officer in the school. If you look at a lot of these volatile issues across the country, they're not solved by force, right? Because they just become more common. They're solved by dialogue. They're solved by people communicating force is just a byproduct of all these things. So one more benefit of having another uniformed police officer in the school, the kids will know the officer, they'll speak to the officer, they'll, have a rapport ideally with the officer. That's a good thing. It's a good thing when kids and adults have communication and rapport with the police officer. We need more of that. We need that every day. We need people having dialogue and, respecting each other's opinion in schools and out of schools. So I just wanted to highlight what Mike said because it's important, and it's just one more benefit in my mind of having a uniformed police officer in a school that we haven't been talking about. That officer, like a teacher, has many skills that he brings to a school setting, right? It's not just being there as a last line of defense. He's a problem solver, he's a communicator, he's a supporter of the kids. So, good questions and thoughtful questions. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks. Can I say one
Sure,
more thing?
absolutely. No, open dialogue.
One of the things that has struck me over the last couple months, because if you had told me on February 14th, should we put these officers in here, I probably would have said 100% yes. That's the parent in me, that's the mom in me, that's who I would want to protect all the children in the school. But when I sit at this dais with all of you, I become an elected official. And we are not the only school district right now that's struggling with this. There are actually school districts in New Jersey that the boards have voted to install the Class 3 officers, and they're getting some serious pushback from their community. And in doing some research on that, I want to see if there's some follow-up articles. I'll be happy to share the article with everybody about it. There's some serious pushback up in some northern towns about that. So as an elected official, my mind went to that, and I think I would, before I came to a final opinion, I would like to know a little more detail as the holistic look of what it would look like in our schools. It's one thing to put a Class 3 officer in there, but are we going to address how the children enter and exit? And are the parents going to buy in? And are the children going to buy in? I think it'll be a learning curve, but I'd like to see what that's going to look like and the additional costs and whatever we need to do to affect change if that's the direction we want to go in. I think in order for me to make an educated decision sitting at this dais as opposed to sitting in that chair out there, I would like to see what we are going to do, and I'm happy to work with Mike on that to come up with a vision of what that looks like at all 6 schools. So we could share that with the public maybe at a meeting like that, and talk to our 2 towns and see, because as it is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, these people would be hired by both the township police force and the borough police force. They cannot legally be employees of the school district. Is that my understanding? Mm-hmm. So I think that makes it tricky. So I think if we can have an outline that we could share with each other, and I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that over the summer. I think it would be important to see what that looks like and how it's going to work in Chatham best.
And are you referring specifically to Bloomfield?
I am to Bloomfield.
I just didn't know if there was another. Thanks.
Mike, can you get I know that there are specific training guidelines for Class 3 officers in the state of New Jersey. Can you please provide the board as to what those training regimens look like? And that might help us in getting kind of how they vet these officers. It's not, from what I understand, not every officer is able to be a Class 3 officer. There's certain stipulations and whatnot. So if you can get that to us, that would be great. Thanks.
Any additional dialogue?
I just have one more thing. I definitely support a holistic approach in looking at this. I'd like to know as much as I can about the psychology of a school shooter, right? If you look at that, certain elements of the psychology of this, it seems to me that we would, in addition, if we decide to go down the road of Class 3 officers, that we would do ourselves some benefit by having 2 or 3 times as many student assistance counselors as we do Class 3 officers. Because, while not every kid in a troubled psychological state will become a school shooter, we also have to prevent, alcoholism and all kinds of other things. So a holistic approach needs to be taken with regard to mental health of our students. Whether or not the answer is prevention in terms of a Class 3 officer or prevention by other means, I think we have to look at all of it.
Mike, if I may, I think those are great points, and I think that we need to have more dialogue about that, but I just want to emphasize again, because I think it's important, it's a potential last line of defense and another law enforcement tool to be in our schools, but, a Class 3 officer does not cure this disease, right, as I think we all know here, and, we should, I believe, my personal opinion and professional opinion is we could never substitute having good mental health and good brain health and good education and resources, trying to identify issues that may arise as we should never weigh that against having a Class 3 officer. These are while they work hand in hand, they are not one or the other, or we always have to have those resources in the schools, and we always have to be thinking proactively about what the professionals are doing and, what resources we're giving our, Mike and the school officials to deal with it. But they're not mutually exclusive, so I want to just make that clear. I think we all know that, but we still have to do all those other things. But if something does happen, and all of those things, as they have, time and time again, nationally, fallen through the cracks, right? If you look at all these incidents, unfortunately, when you look back at them, there were a lot of signs. When you go back, Monday morning quarterback, it's easy. But there are a lot of signs, sadly, this happened with this student and they did this, and even people reported it, but it wasn't followed up on. So the signs are there and they still fall through the cracks. That's the scary thing in my mind, unfortunately, because people are human, they're stressed, their resources are spread thin in the schools, so they're still falling through the cracks, and things are coming to a head where we're having these incidents in schools. Kids are going in and shooting, children and adults. So more so, when we even recognize it and we say the signs are there, yet it's still occurring, right? It's a phenomenon, and that's, in my mind, more of a reason why we have to plan for all scenarios. This being just one scenario, that it gets that far. And that's our last line of defense. That's why I believe it's so important, and I feel that we would be remiss if we didn't plan for all scenarios. Just like we wouldn't say we're not going to put the resources in the schools to be proactive and treat the disease, not just deal with the symptoms. We have to treat the disease, and we have to deal with the symptoms and the activities that emerge from that disease. We have to think of it that way, in my mind. And I think Matt said it very succinctly. It's terrible that we even have to have this conversation, but we have to have it, and we have to think of it in a broad sense. And as Ann said, we have to do everything we can to address it and keep our kids safe. So, it's an unsavory conversation for all of us, but I truly believe, and we've had a lot of dialogue around this. It's hard, it's emotional, but I would feel remiss if I didn't approach it that way. So your input is excellent, thank you. I think it's good input, and I think the dialogue is good. And I think, Bill's dialogue and continued questions, while I don't always, enjoy everything he says, I think it's hugely important. And I think that the whole community needs to be out here. And, I think the more dialogue we have, the better. I think people should be critical. And I think that's how you come to the best decision for everyone. If I was not on the board, I would want to have input into this situation. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Additional? Again, not the end of the conversation. This is just the beginning. We have a few takeaways, so we'll pick it up again on July 16th. Thank you, Michelle. And just quickly, the other item that we wanted to discuss, or at least, put out there for the board and the public, and Ann, correct me where I go off trail, we were approached about a piece of property to the right of the high school, and, the owners were just lovely, and they offered us this property. I don't want to mention the price because at this time I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we've declined to maybe pursue it unless there's additional dialogue here. And if I misread our last session, please correct me. It would help if we ever want to expand the cafeteria. The conversation, really, the offer was made to us. We didn't seek it out. Once that property sells, it will never be available to the district, so I think we felt remiss in not mentioning it to the public. But again, I thought that the sentiment was that, yes, it's a great piece of property, gosh, we'd love to, but we don't really have the resources available, and we don't have necessarily an immediate plan, like, oh gosh, if we had that, we're going to absolutely build a particular center. So I don't... Was that the general gist of our last session?
Yeah.
Am I paraphrasing that? Has anybody
Correct.
changed?
I'm looking at Mike. Was that the general gist?
I know.
Did you have a different, okay, I just wanted to make sure that you were on the same page.
And again, it was super lovely that the folks came to us. I couldn't be more gracious for their offer. Does anybody have a different opinion or a different thought since last we met? Again, I would love to acquire the property. Personally, I just don't know that the time is right. And, talking about safety and mental health, and, I don't know that that's a priority right now. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so.
I would agree.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that was, any additional board business? I know it's been a bit of a heavy night toward the end here.
Oh, okay.
Any additional board business? Anything new, anything that we talked about? No, we're going to wrap it up. Okay, so we have our second opportunity for public commentary. Again, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. No.
Hi, Stuart Carr again from 3 Crestwood Drive. Again, as I've commented a few times before, whenever you have this back and forth, I think it's absolutely terrific. Again, it's a tough topic and all that, but hearing 9 voices fighting it out back and forth, I think is a very, very healthy thing for the community. So I appreciate you, on behalf of whomever else, I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Getting to math for a second. $50,000, does that mean we have $10,000 per campus? Does that mean we have $9,000 per school? Does that mean we have $50,000 times 5 or 6 people? How does 50,000?
50 times 6 schools.
Okay, so it's not 50, it's 300K.
50 per individual.
Okay, I didn't hear that little detail, so it's 300K. Okay, which is still, again, noise relative to a $70 million budget. Next thing, again, I think the fact that that's noise, it's probably not worth going out to a public question because 300K is, again, noise, and hopefully you can find that in the budget. But on the bigger issue, I think this whole subjective issue of do we want to have people in the school? And again, I guess the mob mentality, if that was the reference to the public, a mob mentality in the public doing things is one thing, but a mob mentality in the voting booth is something else. That's why you have a voting booth, because you don't get a mob in the voting booth. You get people who can actually individually make decisions on their own behalf. So I guess what I'd like to hear to make sure I'm clear, right now we have, I think, 3, Ryan, Mary, and Ms. Kenny, for the public question, however you want to define that, irrespective of the cash that would take, just do you want to do this or not. Where are we with the other 6 people at this point? And I'm not talking about a survey, I'm talking about an actual public question that can supplement any kind of public forum you have, so you'll get an actual formal vote. If it's 55-45, then obviously we defer to what the board wants.
Right.
But if you have something extreme, like 90% of the people come in and say, we want it or we don't want it, that's a pretty substantial, signal. So I think, again, this is a very good, independent of the dollars, a very good forum for a public question scenario. Non-binding, I would suspect. So we have 3 people, I think, so far who are, in that camp right now. Of the other 6,
If I could break in for a second, I don't think it's appropriate to assign an opinion to anyone here. I haven't made up my mind. People here can change their mind. We're fleshing this out in public because it's, as you pointed out, we think you all deserve to hear this back and forth. But if you're trying to take away, I see a vote of 3 or 4 to 5 or et cetera, one way or another. I think that's it's foolhardy and premature.
well, usually, again, my eloquence is my problem. My message, I think, if somebody else could say it would be much better. I'm asking about the public input dimension, not whether you, 9 people, again, back to Mary's point, not whether you want guns in or not, whether you are in favor of having formal public input in that question. That would be, again, non-binding, that would be incorporated into the calculus.
Stewart?
Yes, Stuart.
Stuart Carr, yes.
What's your last name?
C-A-R-R, Carr.
Mr. Carr, I think that the board is open to all input from the community. I think that's where we are. I think Mr. Arnott gave you very good feedback, and I think that, we all want to have an open mind and take all of the public input, and if there's anything that changes during that dialogue or causes us to believe that, we're not making the best decision for the children in the community, that we'll adjust our thinking or be educated, if you will, if we, we're open-minded. I think that's the answer.
Can I ask from a procedural perspective, sorry,
Sure.
any non-binding referendum could be held once a year? Can only be done, from a legal perspective, it can be done on one day of the year, which would be November, correct?
I believe that's correct.
So at that point, the question is, do we want to tie our hands to a single event, in terms of a non-binding question versus relying upon surveys where you get quicker response and/or a higher number of public forums for public feedback might be the better.
Again, if it's a non-binding issue, you don't have to agree with the opinion. I just think, again, 3 people raised the issue of a question.
Once, if we sit there and make a decision, I have to wait 11 months. If we have other avenues to get quicker feedback, I'd probably be more
Sure,
supportive.
absolutely. But again, if it were available and if you could do it, 3 people have said the idea of a question as part of the calculus is a good thing. Not, again, I want it or I don't want it. Where are we and when are we going to decide whether the idea of a question should be included in the discussion?
But did 3 people, say that? Say that? I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
I
then
didn't
my
hear that, but I
mistake.
believe Mr. Arnott said it's premature. We're just not there yet, Stuart.
If you did.
I mean, if they want, if those 3 people.
Right, feedback,
I
right.
said either in a
right,
survey
right,
or
right,
something.
Right, but we didn't talk about a question on the ballot. We wanted feedback from the community. I just wanted, that's how I heard it.
Okay,
So,
I think we
If
as a
I'm-
board provided a dialogue as to what we thought.
Sure.
When public make comment, this is a time now for you to tell us what you think. Well, you already heard what we thought.
Understood, but
Now,
procedurally, I
this is not a
heard,
dialogue. This is not a dialogue.
procedurally, I heard about a public question.
Okay, but we're
And
telling you,
will
you've been
that
to
be-
enough board meetings to see that the public's come up and addressed the board. You heard our dialogue. Okay, we heard what you're saying. You want to take a straw poll. We're not going to do it. We said this is the first conversation of many that we will have. So, we typically, the comments come up, we listen, and this is becoming a back and forth, and I don't think it's productive right now.
Just asking the question that 3 members
We heard your
raised.
question.
Okay, well, we'll come back and ask again. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Any other? Bill, you running up or out? Up, okay. Bill, if you wouldn't just, comment, and we're not going to be able to do a back and forth,
No,
but
that's okay. I'm not interested in back and forth. I just wanted to thank you for a free and open exchange. I appreciate that. You take your job seriously. We all thank you for that. I am just sorry that it is in front of an empty auditorium.
It's on TV.
we'll do more, though. Again, this is the beginning, right? This is not the end.
No, and I think
Sure, go ahead, Matt. Did you say?
yes.
Do we have an executive session,
Yes.
or no?
Yeah.
I was kind of leaving that up to you if you wanted to discuss anything in executive session.
I don't think we have anything.
beyond your statement that you issued in the beginning of the meeting.
Does anybody want to talk more about the statement at the beginning of the statement?
There's nothing to talk about.
No,
Okay.
I don't think there's anything
Yep,
additional.
no
If a board
executive
member has
session
a
then.
question, though, I didn't want to squelch that.
Understood.
Okay, so no executive session. I make a motion to close the public session.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Thank you, everybody. Tom, thank you very much.
Against him.